today. We appreciate this opportunity to share one of our instruction activities with everyone. My name is Jackie Bryan, and I'm a Reference and Instructional Services Librarian at St. Leo University. And also joining me is Ilana Karshmer, who is our Instruction Program and Information Literacy Librarian at St. Leo. Today, we are going to discuss how we created instruction kits for a biology bootcamp library session based on a concept from the new ACRL framework. Okay. All right, my screen is not advancing. Just hold on a second. Let me see. Just start it over again here. There we go. Okay. So the Biology Bootcamp program takes place 1 week prior to the beginning of the fall semester and is geared toward helping our incoming biology students adapt to college life and coursework. Back in the summer of 2014, the biology faculty members requested that we provide a library orientation for the new students and introduce them to our biology resources. The catch was we only had 30 minutes for each session, and that, of course, was very challenging. There were to be 2 sessions with approximately 30 students each. As our lesson plan further developed, we eventually divided the students into small working groups of 3 or 4, depending on the number in attendance. So we had to keep in mind that these incoming students would also be enrolled in our Introduction to College course, which includes an information literacy component. And we wanted to create an activity that would not duplicate that content. You know, sometimes students have a tendency to think that all library sessions are the same and, you know, one size fits all. So we wanted to make this biology session unique. And you can see on this slide an overview of the information literacy component of the Intro to College course, which we also teach. And that has 3 sequential parts. So first, the students watch a pre-session video before coming to the library. And we introduce them to basic information literacy concepts in that video, and there is a worksheet that goes along with it. Then they come to the library with their class, and we start with a math activity. So they go around to different locations in the library, and they have to answer questions, and they do small groups. Then we review the video topics, and then we finish up by playing Library Jeopardy, which they really enjoy, and it's a lot of fun. And then after they leave the library, there's a follow-up worksheet that the students do independently. So both the video worksheet and the follow-up worksheet are graded by the instructors of the course. So when we received the instruction request from the biology department, we had just returned from the 2014 ALA conference in Las Vegas, where there was a lot of discussion on threshold concepts and the new ACRL framework for information literacy for higher education. You can see the 6 frames listed here. Authority is constructed and contextual. Information creation as a process. Information has value. Research as inquiry, scholarship as conversation, and searching as strategic exploration. Each frame also includes a knowledge practices, which are behaviors that demonstrate understanding, as well as dispositions, which are habits of mind. The ACRL framework, as you probably are aware, was inspired or informed by the threshold concept theory. And so threshold concepts are those ideas in any discipline that are passageways or portals to enlarged understanding or ways of thinking and practicing within that discipline. We wanted to choose a frame that was related to the instruction request from the biology faculty, and we decided to focus on the concept of format as process. We were working at that time with the draft of the framework. So in the final version, format as process became information creation as process. And then we selected the knowledge practice of identifying which formats best meet particular information needs. So our next step, following the method of backward design, we started by developing 3 learning outcomes for the library session. So first, we wanted the students to be able to differentiate among various formats, also to be able to critically evaluate information, and finally, to leave the session with a positive connection to the library. So Alana and I worked together on a lot of projects. So we were sitting in my office one day, kind of brainstorming about what kind of activity we could come up with. We wanted to engage the students. We wanted to make it informative and fun. So we thought of things related to biology. Some of the things we thought about were labs and experiments and science stations and science kits. And somehow, after all that, we came up with the idea of developing instruction kits. So this photo shows you what our instruction kits look like. We wanted them to be fun and appeal to the students' interest in biology. As you can see, we used very inexpensive pencil boxes. I think we got them at Michael's, and labeled them with the common and scientific names of various insects. Then we placed a plastic insect inside the box to attract the students' attention. We ordered our insects from Oriental Trading Catalog, where you can get a variety of inexpensive items. Each box also contained colored worksheets representing 3 different information formats, along with instructions for the activity. So on the top half of the worksheet, there were step-by-step instructions on how to access information on a particular insect using one of the resources that you see listed on the screen. So for example, the pink worksheet provided instructions on how to find information or how to find an ebook in the library catalog on their particular insect. And then the yellow one directed students to find a journal article in Science Direct. And the purple one was an encyclopedia article in Access Science. And then we actually had some boxes with a 4th resource in case the groups were larger. So that one directed students to find a journal article in ProQuest. So there were step-by-step instructions for them to follow. And then the bottom half of the worksheet contained questions that the group would answer together once they reviewed the information found in the different resources. So now I'm going to attempt to turn the screen over to Ilana, and then she will describe our lesson plan and the actual process in a little more detail. So just give me a second here. Okay. Okay. So Ilana, are you there? I'm turning it over to you.
Yes. And give me just a second.
Okay.
Okay. Hopefully you can all see the screen, picking up where Jackie left off. A little bit about our lesson plan. After our students were assembled, we went over the basic plan for the class because, as you know, we only had 30 minutes, so we didn't want to spend a lot of time talking, but we needed to give them some direction. We put students into groups of 3 or 4. 3 was our preference, but we knew that even though we had planned for 10 groups of 3 with 30 students, that you're never really going to get that. So we put them based on how many actually showed up. We reviewed the contents of the kits and the instructions for the activity. and then we gave them a timed amount of time. That doesn't make sense, but we gave them time, and we had a timer because I like to walk around with my timer to tell them you only have 8 minutes left or whatever it is. And then we gave them time at the end to discuss their findings in their group and then to share with the rest of the class. Ooh, so I don't know why that. Okay, sorry. Okay, so this is basically what they got in their worksheet. Each member selected a colored worksheet. They followed the instructions to find information on their assigned insects, and then they talked about what they found to figure out which one gave different kinds of information. If there was time left over, not sure why it's doing that, we asked them to take a look at our biology subject research guide and then to be prepared to share their findings with the group. And this was just what was on the handout that we gave them for each of the different resources, no matter what they were looking at. On that same worksheet, we asked them to consider which resource provided an overview of the insect, which resource provided the most current up-to-date information, which one provided the most in-depth information, and which one had the narrowest focus in terms of information. So we kind of asked them to look at the different sources in terms of different types of information and why those types of information and how those types of information might be most useful. Based on our reflections, now we've done this session now twice, we found that overall students were pretty engaged. They liked it, they thought it was fun, they thought the insects were gross, which we kind of were going for a little bit. We found that it was a good use of the time because we didn't have much time. We found that overall, each student's individual experience with information literacy did have an effect on their ability to participate, which was something that we weren't really able to address because there just wasn't a lot that we could do in that amount of time. After the first session, we came up with some revisions. We would like more time. Obviously, that's an issue. We asked for more time for the second session. We were not given more time. That's something we are begging for. If we're going to do it again, we'd like at least 45 minutes, if not 50, because 30 minutes just we run out of time. It's very difficult to get it done in that amount of time. We revised our directions because we wanted to make sure that they could get it done as quickly as possible, so we wanted clarity in each of the directions so that they wouldn't have to ask us for help. We decided we wanted to implement some sort of formal assessment so we could get feedback. And also we created a biology brochure that they could take with them so that they could use these resources later on. Hopefully it would help them remember what they had done during the session. These were our assessment questions, basically the same questions that they were asked during the session. And they answered based on these same answers at the bottom: encyclopedia, journal, article, ebook, or database. Now, what we found, and we did use Qualtrics to collect this data, I should say. Now, what we found was, what was interesting about this is that basically, I'm going to get more into this in a little bit, but we did not find that they got out of it what we expected them to. But the most important part is that we asked them if the session helped them to understand the different types of resources available, and we asked them either stop, and most of them did agree that this did help them, which is what we wanted them to get out of it. So that was a positive thing to come out of our assessment. I will say, however, that some of the students did not seem to get what we expected. They said, for instance, that journals and ebooks provided a brief overview of information, while the encyclopedia provided the most in-depth information, which is definitely not what we expected and not what we would have said. However, that could be attributed to the fact that they didn't have time to look at each of the resources on their own, and possibly some of them didn't have time to really look at them in the amount of time that was given. So there's a lot of factors going into this that we might want to address for next time. But the fact that they all agreed that they got something out of the session and that it did create a positive association with the library really is what we wanted. In 30 minutes, what else can you ask for? We were positive. We were happy. It gives us something to work with. Now, if you're interested in doing something like this for yourself, this is a handout that you can use to think about how to go about creating your own kit. First of all, you might want to think about the subject area, the threshold concept that you're interested in, and what your learning outcome, your session goal, your takeaway, and this is just a way to kind of visualize that before you actually create your session. Brainstorm some activities, come up with some kit ideas, just kind of jot everything down. On the other side, you can come up with some logistics, an ideal group size, make a list of materials, contingency plans, and come up with some ideas of how you might assess and evaluate the success of your session. It's a really good idea to put this down on paper because I can tell you from our experience, things did not always turn out the way that we thought they would. And it was really good that we had kind of come up with different plans, having things printed out, having the objects in hand. That's a really good way to get them in to the lesson. Even though it's not really part of the lesson, it's kind of a way to hook them in. So having this when you start is much easier than going back and trying to add something in. And I'm going to give you some examples next. So for instance, here are some ideas that you might want to use. We did ours for biology and we used insects because we thought insects had that fun and gross factor that at least would get people like, ew, I don't want to touch that. And actually, I know it might seem a little bit sexist, but we did hear the girls going, ew, especially with the roach. Roaches are gross. They just are. So, for instance, if you were going to change this session a little bit, you could do a science class if you were studying global warming. You might look at resources like CQ Researcher, newspaper articles, scholarly journals. You could also use a little snowman. You could make one out of Play-Doh or with cotton balls or something like that just to get them kind of focused on an actual item. If you lived in a snowy area, which obviously we do not, you could actually bring in like a little ice cube, something just to kind of get them focused in on the actual lesson. For a music history class, students could examine the historical development of musical instruments by looking at encyclopedia entries, books, websites. The kit could include pictures of instruments throughout the years, or even you could bring in instruments themselves for them to try out, to look at. It's just something tangible to get them into the lesson. For a literature class studying a particular piece of period literature, students could look at primary resources, literary criticism, encyclopedias. The object could be something to do with the period or the piece of literature, like costumes or masks used like in the early Renaissance, something like that. Or for maybe a criminal justice class that's studying crime scene investigation, students could look at encyclopedias, court cases, scholarly journals, and your object could be something like a magnifying glass, and you could put in like, even something like fingerprints for them to look at. You could even make them using like Wordle, little fingerprints with actual words in there, just something to kind of get them focused on the activity, something fun, get them going. It's just kind of a cool way to get them into the assignment, to get them focused, and to get them going. If you have something fun, it's just, we all know if you're interested and you're having fun, you're probably going to learn better. I think all the research bears that out. Now, we have published on this in College and Research Library News. It was a very early article that came out in May of 2015. It was basically an overview of what we did. It doesn't have any information really on our assessment because that came later. But if you're interested in reading in more detail and not having the slides go by in a weird timing session, you can always take a look at that. If you have any questions about what we did, how this relates back to any of the concepts, to the framework, to the frames. If you have some ideas you might want to share, this would be a great time to do it because obviously this is not a super long presentation. If you're looking for ways to include other kinds of research activities or to include a younger set of students, if you want to talk about that a little bit, we have some time to do that. Does anyone have questions?
So I'm not seeing any questions, but while you're thinking, I actually attended another webinar yesterday from ACRL, and they were talking about the threshold concepts and the framework and teaching. But someone said, and I'm going to paraphrase this, that we can still teach what we were teaching, but the framework encourages us to think about where our students get stuck in the learning process, and we can use this new framework to maybe inspire us to see things from a different perspective. And I think that's really what Alana and I tried to do. So we were focused on the concept, but how could we use that in a creative way to introduce the students to this material? So I find myself that I'm still teaching skills, but I'm emphasizing the concept, the underlying concept beneath the skill as well.
Absolutely. And as you can see, even though we focused on information creation as a process, there are really any number of the other frames that would really fit in with this activity. So if you were to do something similar to this, you could definitely bring in some of the other frames and even bring in some activities that sort of emphasize those frames and what they're trying to get at, so that students are both learning those skills, as Jackie is saying, but at the same time thinking about things in different ways. So they're getting those skills that they need so they can use a database to find articles, but they're thinking about what that actually means in terms of research. So it is a skill, but also a concept, and they're taking both away with them when they're done with the session. And hopefully you get more than 30 minutes, because it is really tight to get that in. So. And I see that Mark has written, it helps to see someone using backwards design and the framework to create an accessible instruction. Yes, it's really important. We've talked, I think Jackie and I have had conversations about this, that doing assessment is sort of the missing piece of the puzzle right now. I think we're all really excited about using the frames, and we all have ideas of how to try them. The question now is, how do I assess them? So we've tried using, we use, like I said, Qualtrics. We just came up with some questions. Now, what we found is that I'm not sure students necessarily got what we wanted them to get. Again, is that because of our design or because they didn't really get what we were wanting them to get? We have some ideas that we can try, but it's an ongoing process, and this is going to take a while. It's not going to happen overnight. But yes, whatever you do, it's a great idea. Just try some sort of assessment, whether it's just using some sort of comments, or just some sort of narrative. I mean, that's a place to start if you're not really sure. At least you have that to go forward, and hopefully that will help you get into some more of the data-based types of assessment.
I agree, and some things are harder to assess than others. I mean, how do you assess if someone has, gone over the threshold with a new concept? I mean,
yeah,
it's, I
especially
think
given
something.
what we do. I mean, if you could do like a portfolio, then you can see that development. But if you are doing it in 30 minutes, it's very hard to do that.
And what makes it hard is that we, often don't get to see that final product. I think we were talking about that last week in another webinar. We have the one shot, and so if they're working on a paper or a project or an assignment, how often do we ever even get to see that and the results? Not usually. So.
Now, what was interesting for us was we actually went back to some of the students that we had over the summer and asked them to give us some feedback about whether the session had been helpful to them over the course of the semester. This was not done in any sort of very scientific way. We just wanted it for ourselves, for our purposes, but we did get a few people who wrote narrative type, qualitative type of assessment forms that we collected, and they did say that it was helpful to them with some of their biology assignments. Now, what we were hoping to see is that they would have been able to sort of translate what they learned in the session not only to research in biology but also to other courses as well. But clearly a 30-minute session isn't necessarily going to do all of that. But it was a start, and at least they remembered it. So, hey, that's good.
Have we communicated our results to the instructors? No, not in a formal way. I mean, we've just talked briefly about the session and how we would like to improve it, but we have not shown them the actual results of our survey, etc. So that might be something we could do in the
I think they're
future.
this close, very close to giving us more time. We have begged now 2 summers in a row. I think we might be able to get them to 45 minutes next summer if they allow us to do it. I think, unfortunately, as we all know, we've been used in the past as sort of a filler, and they're like, oh, we have a free 30 minutes here, let's get the library in, which is unfortunate, but we all know it happens. And rather than say, no, we only have 30 minutes and that's not really fair to us, I think we just wanted to take advantage of what we had. But it would be nice to have a longer amount of time where we could really sort of build on what we've been doing and get some of our changes in there that would be a little bit more meaningful.
Yes, and you can sometimes take a general request like that that's not so specific and use that as an opportunity to maybe be more creative and do something along the lines of the framework and really introduce a particular concept. Because if the faculty member is not saying, well, I want you to show them how to find peer-reviewed empirical research and psych info, you have a lot more leeway sometimes when there's this general request of, okay, well, just introduce them to the library. And that's basically what we were dealing with. So it gave us more opportunity in that way.
Absolutely. It really kind of opened things up, because had the instructors come to us and said, you have to show them this, this, and this, we wouldn't have been able to do it. It wouldn't have happened. So that, if you do have the opportunity when someone says to you, oh yeah, just do something. I mean, this is, we always sort of complain about that because we don't really always know what to do. But if you find yourself in that position, use that as an opportunity to use one of the frames, to try some activity that you think would further one of the frame ideas, or to try to include some skills that some of the dispositions and the learning practices and all that kind of get you closer to that threshold, and just see how it goes. I mean, there's no harm in trying. If it doesn't work, try it again. I mean, we're all sort of learning here, and it's the best way to go is just to give it a try.
I agree. And I mean, this was our first attempt, and we said to each other, well, we just had come back from the conference, the ALA conference. Okay, let's try this, let's try to embrace this, see how it goes. And it seemed to work fairly well, but of course there is always room for improvement. So we'll see what happens if we do it again this coming summer.
Yep. And it would be cool to try it with other classes, in different subject areas too, and see how that works, and see if we can come to some sort of, kind of distill it down into sort of an essence, instead of just so it's not so subject specific and it's more sort of framework specific. But that's in the future. Mm-hmm. This is just still in the very beginning stages. So it looks like there are no other questions.
I don't know. Vicki was talking about a question box.
Yeah, I'm checking the question.
I don't even see that on my screen.
It's underneath polls. I don't know if you can see it there.
I don't see it. But there's nothing in there, I assume.
No.
Okay. I don't know why it's not showing here. All right, well, you have our contact information there, so if you think of anything in the meantime, please contact us. I believe Vicki sent the PowerPoint out last night, so you should have that as well. And hopefully you got the one that wasn't timed. So,
Yeah, sorry about that. I don't know
not
why
sure
it
what
was timed
happened
on
there.
paper, but hey, it worked. You know what? Technology, as we all know, it's always going to give you a problem. It's okay.
So thank you all for being here today, and it's been a great opportunity for us to share as well.
And if you have ideas, send them to us, because we want to hear your ideas too. Thank you.